The agenda this week studied up on French immersion in Ontario, assessed the state of Canada's temporary foreign workers program, and took notes on ransomware. The agenda's week in review begins with the Ontario's Liberal government hitting the reset button.
Tim, by all of these independent metrics, things are better than they were several years ago, and yet the provincial government's numbers are not. How come?
Well, I think it's a complicated set of things. I think one of your favorite politicians, Bill Davis, used to say bland works, and part of the thesis of that was don't do a lot and the public won't notice you and bland will get you reelected. The problem is we have a premier who's actually got a very active and activist agenda, ran and won on being, the activist center, and everything from, implementing a pension plan to, free tuition, to climate change, to a significant investment in transit and transportation, and selling Hydro One to do that. There's a bunch of things where she is actively pursuing a really aggressive agenda, which is the opposite of bland, and you have to break a few eggs to make the omelet, as the old expression goes. I think also, there's been a few controversies. There are, the government. It's a new government, but it inherits a government that has been of Dalton McGuinty that's been in power for a while, and I think people, from an economic point of view, are feeling some anxiety, even though some of the numbers are good. I think people's personal experience is still a bit anxious, and that's going to be reflected politically. The election's still a long way away, though.
Yep. You do know Bill Davis watches this program, though, and will not like the fact that you just said he basically did nothing for 14 years.
Well, he did one big thing when he extended separate schools funding, that's for sure.
Okay, moving right along. Jennifer, how would you answer that question? Why aren't the numbers better for the Liberals today?
I think much of what Tim has pointed out is true, but you have a government that is operating very much in a post-recessionary budget atmosphere where they've been really trying to get that deficit down, and I think, as you pointed out, that's going to be ending pretty soon. In the next year, they will have a balanced budget. Doing that at the same time is trying to rebuild, honestly, an antiquated and crumbling system and infrastructure that was built by our forebears for us. And this is a premier that I think is very focused on making sure that this safe little corner of the planet's going to be that way for future generations as well. And she's making some tough decisions. It's not just about rebuilding things the way they were, but rebuilding them for the future, which is going to look very different and for a lot more people. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet, and we're heading for 8 billion pretty fast. So I think those are realities, and she is moving as fast as she can, and I think people are now going, wait a minute, we can't take that much pressure all at once, and she's saying, I hear you.
Peter, how would you answer that?
I think I have to echo what the last two people have responded to the question. Too much, too fast. One thing I know about Kathleen Wynne, although I sat on the opposite side of the aisle from her, is that she is a sincere person in the sense that what she's doing, she believes in. Whether we believe in it or not is a whole other question, we being the big we, all of us, but she believes that she should be doing all of the things that she's doing. I think it's too much too fast. And I think that what that's done in terms of trying as well to manage the finances of a province that has broken finances is get her in the way of some of the kitchen table issues. And so when people talk to me as a former politician, they say, I can't stand that Kathleen Wynne, and I say, why? And they say, have you seen your hydro bill? Is it as bad as mine? And now they're going to add money to what I pay for gas in my car. I have to think about whether I can feed my kids. Those are the kinds of conversations that I'm having. So if I'm having them, and I'm not even an active politician anymore, I can only imagine what kind of pressure she is feeling, and I think that pushing the reset button makes some sense.
Ginny, what do you see in the numbers?
Yeah, I think she's in this nitty-gritty period of scrambling the eggs and trying to get a lot of the work done that she needs to before she goes into the next election. So she's not got ready-made, happy announceables to go out with. The ORPP should have been that. It's now not happening. She should have been able to go up and have a few days of really strong message days where she could talk about young people reaping the benefits of her election promises. That's gone now. She's lost that opportunity. So she's stuck in the nitty-gritty. She's at her best when people see her as a person. She's very sympathizable. We saw that in the advertising in the last election. I think it went over really well. And she hasn't had an opportunity to present that face. I suspect that she will ramp back up to that in the next 6 months to a year.
Tom.
I think the top line numbers that you introduced hide some underlying trends when you start breaking them down that are generating some underlying malaise and anxiety in the population. And Ms. Wynne she's not perhaps the one who's showing that she's got the hand to lead the ship in these changes. For example, while you're right about all the economic growth numbers and the employment numbers changing in a positive direction since 2009, we've got to keep in context that was the year after a recession from which we've really not recovered. And it's in the context of some larger social changes. 15 years ago, Canadians, not just Ontarians, but Ontarians, 67% would define them as middle class. But ECO's polling shows us that now that number is down to 47%. People who consider themselves working class have gone from 24% to 31%. People who consider them poor from 5 to 12%. The benefits of growth, the benefits of employment it's this bifurcation of society. We see it in Toronto, where we have middle-class neighborhoods and working-class neighborhoods, and we see it in the small towns where, it's come to the place where people don't have factory jobs that earn good money. They look at the teacher and think, that's the rich person. So, that's where we've become as a province. Ms. Wynne, I think, has not shown people that she's got an agenda that is going to address this problem, this underlying problem. And in some of the reversals, whether it's on the pension plan, whether it's on the electricity issues, some of the reversals, I think, start to worry people that this is not the person who can lead the ship.
Let me put this issue on the table here. Sheldon, I'm going to go to Board 2 now. Board 2. This is Aaron Hutchins writing for Maclean's magazine, where he writes, French-English bilingualism rates may be on the decline in Canada, but when it comes to getting kids into French immersion programs, which have come to be seen by many as a free private school within the public school system, there is nothing, it seems, that a Canadian parent won't do. For every student who graduates from French immersion, there's at least one other who has been bumped out of the program and put into an English-only stream that many deem inferior. Well-meaning parents may feel that French immersion is the answer for every child. In reality, it has become an elitist, overly restrictive system geared to benefit a certain type of student. Okay, Mary, have at it.
FSL is for all. It's provincial policy in Ontario. That is not the program in and of itself is not elitist.
That's the policy, but this
are there parents who might be elitist who put their kids in French immersion? Sure. What are you going to do about that? Does that really matter? What matters is whether school boards and the Ministry of Education are responding and identifying any barriers that might exist to participation. So I could lay out a bunch of different barriers, but what we like to see is school boards who are very committed to equity and inclusion, and they look at their French immersion programs through that lens to make sure that the opportunity is accessible to all, that a kid can get a bus if they live far away, that the information is shared. Well, that's true.
There is this mentality among parents that I've spoken with about the English stream being a place where kids are who have behavioral needs, who have learning challenges, and that's where they go. So yes, there is this mentality among parents that I've spoken with that are in my neighborhood that tell me that the teacher encouraged their kid to go into the French immersion program because of what the English program looked like. There is this mentality of elitism in the French program. As much as we'd like to deny it and think French immersion is for all, as a parent, you're thinking, I want my kid to do slightly better. I want my kid to have a leg up, and I don't want my kid to fall behind in their academics. And if they're going to fall behind in their academics, as wrong as it is in their academics in the English stream, I don't want to put my kid there.
Stuart, would you acknowledge this elitist angle in the story?
Well, on this point, Mary and I have had our disagreements in the past, but I'm in agreement with Mary. We need equity, we need inclusiveness. Is there an elitist angle to it? Absolutely. There's a perception out there by some that it's more rigorous, it's more academic, it's value added. The students that graduate ultimately from grade 12, like we're talking elementary French immersion, but these kids go through the entire system, have an advantage. We've surveyed parents in preschool and kindergarten parents, and they've told us that we've asked them the reasons why they're putting their children in French immersion, and they say they want a second language, it's a bilingual country, for travel, value added. We don't hear from the parents.
No one's going to say we're elitists.
But we do know that there's that, we know that some people believe that the kids are stronger, they get better academic performances. What I would say to those parents, in our system, our board, let's take a look at the kids that graduate out of grade 12 and where their destination is after there. And I would argue that the students that come out of French immersion do no better or no worse than the students that come out of our core English programs and go off to post-secondary or whatever it is they decide to do.
But the big difference being that they could go off to the University of Laval and study in French, and kids that have been in core French are not likely to have that opportunity. So it is a little bit limited.
Students in core French can go into French in university.
Absolutely.
They don't need French immersion, so they can go core French to university. So it's, there's still that opportunity there.
Yeah, there are many, many different paths to bilingualism. It doesn't specifically have to be French immersion.
You can go to Jean-Pierre for the summer.
Exactly. I think we help a lot of our members of parliament to do that over the course of the summer.
And you think, Steve, how many of our students in our system in Ontario now who are bilingual, trilingual? French isn't the language. It's many other languages, Arabic, Hindi, whatever.
I mean, we see that at our annual public speaking contest. We always ask the kids, everybody here speaks English, all the kids and the parents put up their hand, everybody speaks French, it's usually just the kids. How many speak a third language? How many speak a fourth language? And it's amazing how many hands go up.
Amazing because a lot or a little?
A lot. There's tons and tons of kids that speak 2 different languages at home. They have 2 parents who speak 2 different languages.
If you go outside Ontario, if you go to Edmonton, they offer Mandarin. They don't offer, they offer French, but they're offering different languages, and kids are opting for it.
You tell a story in the documentary, but you obviously can't tell every story of what's happening in the province of Ontario in this area. Would you agree that there are some people who are doing it okay?
Of course, Steve. I don't think that you can blanket generalize about all bosses. Of course, there's going to be good bosses, but there's absolutely going to be bad bosses. I think the problem we have with the program is that there's no monitoring, there's no regulation, and there's a complete lack of enforcement of rules. So, for example, the practice of recruitment in Ontario is widespread. Workers in the Temporary Foreign Worker Program have paid fees as high as $14,000 to private recruiters for the privilege of doing minimum wage jobs in Ontario, picking worms and picking fruit. Yeah. Who's enforcing how recruiters operate? Who's licensing them? Who's regulating them? That's not happening.
Let me ask Jen, are you aware of how the workers who are migrant workers have come to you, whether they've had to go through any of those?
Well, stop workers don't pay recruitment fees.
Yeah,
they're different.
That's it. There is, and that is one of the things that I would say makes the SOP better than the rest of the streams. It's a small difference. It doesn't fix everything.
Under the SOP, it's government to government
SOP
recruiting.
Standing for
the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program. So that's the program with Mexico and the Caribbean states, and it's the governments in those home countries that do the recruiting. So that's a different system, but outside of that, for workers who are coming from any other country under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, it is this private recruitment that Min Sook's talking about. And those workers are paying thousands of dollars. They're paying the application fees that the employers are supposed to pay. And I've also spoken to workers they've been forced to pay their employers' legal fees as well. So they come here with this massive debt before they even start their first day of work. And with the tied work permits, they're essentially held in debt bondage for the entirety of their work term.
And Min Sook, as you've looked at it, how dependent is the economy of this province on the people we're talking about right now?
Well, very much so. And I think when we look at this program, I don't think it's useful to talk about one bad apple. We actually have to see the program and say the cart is rotten. It's not a rotten apple, it's a rotten cart. Workers are coming into a program which structurally defines them as vulnerable. There's a disproportionate power imbalance between the boss and the worker. If the workers are tied to their employer with these tied work permits, they have no ability to say, no, I'm not going to spray those pesticides without proper protection or without proper training. This is an unsafe work condition. No, 30 of us are not going to live in one housing, in one little house. That's not acceptable. The ability, the freedom for workers to speak about their labor and human rights is muzzled by the design of the program. So the program virtually invites abuse. And I think that's the issue. There are good employers. There are conscientious bosses who want to treat workers fairly, but the program itself allows for abuse and exploitation. And so when workplace abuses happen, they're not random, they are chronic, and they are quite regular occurrences.
I wonder if it's even possible that some of the employers don't even know the circumstances under which the migrant workers came here?
No, the
know.
employers know. They have to go through quite a detailed application process to bring workers to Canada, to be authorized to bring workers to Canada under this program. But the program really does, in a very predictable way, allow for exploitation. And it does happen frequently. It's actually the norm. When Ontario's Ministry of Labour did some blitzes out into areas of agriculture, construction, and restaurants where they knew temporary foreign workers were employed, they found that between 54 and 62% of employers were not complying with the minimum laws. Right? When they did a broader sweep through other industries.
Sorry, can I just ask you, is it because they purposefully did not want to, or was it because they were ignorant as to what their obligations were, or what?
They're basic things like paying minimum wage. Like these are not, these are absolute basic requirements of the job. Know. They got to know these things. These are absolute mandatory conditions. But when the ministry went even further and looked at vulnerable workers in broader areas, the non-compliance rate is between 70 and 80%. So when we talk about this being, as Minsuk said, not rotten apples, but a whole system that is designed to encourage exploitation, to allow exploitation, it really is a systemic problem. And we've known about this for decades now.
Ransomware, very simply, is a piece of malicious software, what we call malware in the business, that installs itself on your computer by a variety of means. What happens then is basically all of your files get encrypted, which means you don't have access to them unless you have the key. The crooks hold the key, they demand payment for that key, and there's where we get the name ransomware.
Cheryl, how does somebody outside get access to the inside of your computer?
Well, they're looking for vulnerabilities, and it's things you may not even be aware of. But operating systems get older, faults are detected, and the ransomware is able to come in via exploits. That means that the bad guys have been very carefully doing reconnaissance, looking at the systems that we take for granted every day, looking for the holes in the code, the stuff we're supposed to be patching. They build the exploit takes in their malware, and that's how they're able to deliver the payload of the ransomware.
All right, payload. Let's take a look at this. Can we bring these up, Sheldon? These are some photos of a computer screen that has been infected with ransomware or malware, whatever you're calling it. And what are we looking at here, John? Just basically take us through that.
Yeah, so this is a typical example of something that pops up on your screen. It could either be an actual window pop-up or a wallpaper that gets set on your desktop that describes basically that you've been affected by ransomware. You've been infected by ransomware. You could use the term hacked as well. And it gives you instructions on how to get your files back. It gives you instructions on how to pay, in what form to pay. So in this case, Bitcoin, as we saw, what denominations they're expecting, or what amount they're expecting. And then very often it'll give you some clues as to how to convert your cash into Bitcoins, give you a tutorial on Bitcoins. There's all sorts of things they can include in there. But basically, it's your roadmap from infection to getting your files back.
Cheryl, some people may be watching this right now thinking, this has never happened to me. I've never heard of this. Why do I need to be worried about this? How often does this happen?
First, cyber criminals are businessmen. They're looking for the most efficient return on investment. Unfortunately, ransomware is a moneymaker. It has been going gangbusters, and it's increased by about 300% since 2015. While
300% over 1 year?
Over 1 year. We've gone from 29 different variants in 2015 to 79 in 2016, and that we're just not even through the year yet. We know that more is coming, and it's just being able to demand money and create fear.
Now you say demand money. They actually asked for Bitcoin in that example we just saw.
That's right.
Which is sort of money, but not really money.
No.
Why do they ask for Bitcoin?
Well, it's because it's it's untraceable. It's a digital currency. It helps them cover their tracks. It keeps them in control of the situation. They can tell you how to get it, but they aren't going to get caught when you pay them in it.
And is it only computers that this kind of ransomware can affect?
For the moment, it's basically the Windows operating system. There have been some pieces of malware that affect the Mac OS X operating system as well, and some that infect the Android mobile platform. For now, that seems to be the case that of the widely distributed, the most impact is on those 3 platforms, with Windows being by far the largest share. That doesn't mean that other platforms aren't vulnerable, but for now, that's what we're seeing the criminals infect.
Cheryl just described these criminals as businessmen. Can you tell you tell us a little bit more about who does this?
That's hard to say. I mean, we have some clues. If we look at the code itself, the language that it's written in, some of the comments that are included in the code can give us some clues. Some are outright calling themselves out from their geographic locations. If we trace back the command and control servers now, quickly, that's basically where your computer calls home to get that key to encrypt your stuff. Some of those are located in foreign countries. However, even that can be faked. So yes, most of it does appear to be coming from overseas. If we knew the who, I would be glad to be riding in a police car, knocking on people's doors, because these guys, as Cheryl said, are making incredible amounts of money.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.